Hello and welcome to this tutorial on Bubble.io for beginners. In this video, we're going to learn how to understand Bubble.io step by step. What if I told you that you could build a fully working website or app without writing a single line of code? No, I'm not joking. And yes, you can learn it too, even if you're just starting out. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you exactly how to build web applications using Bubble.io, which is one of the world's most powerful no-code platforms. By the end of this video, you'll understand the basic building blocks of creating your own app. Whether you want to build your own online store, a social media app, or even an app powered by artificial intelligence, Bubble makes it possible. So let's dive right in. The first thing we need to understand is what exactly is Bubble. Bubble is what software developers and technology professionals call a full-stack, no-code platform. Now, let me break down each part of that description because every word is important and meaningful. First, let's talk about full stack. In a world of web development, applications are typically divided into several layers or stacks of technology. The front end is everything that users see and interact with directly. The buttons they click, the forms they fill out, the images they view, the text they read. This is like the facade of a building or the dashboard of a car. It's the visible, interactive surface. Then there's the back end, which is all the behind-the-scenes processing that makes everything work. When you click a save button, something needs to actually save that data somewhere. When you log into your account, something needs to verify your password and retrieve your personal information. When you search for something, something needs to look through databases and return results. All of this invisible but essential work happens in the back end. There's also the database layer, which is where all the information is stored and organized. Think of it like a massive, incredibly well-organized filing system that can instantly retrieve any piece of information you need. Every user account, every post, every image, every transaction, it all lives in databases. Finally, there are all the connections between these layers, the ways the front end communicates with the back end, how the back end queries the database, how external services integrate with your application, and so on. These connections are often called APIs, which stand for Application Programming Interfaces. Traditionally, building a full-stack application meant you needed to learn different programming languages and technologies for each of these layers, understand how they all work together, set up servers, configure databases, manage security, handle user authentication, and solve countless technical challenges. This could easily take months or years of full-time study. But Bubble.io handles all of these layers for you. It provides the front-end visual builder, the back-end processing engine, the database system, the user authentication, the API connections, the server infrastructure, the security protocols, everything. This is why we call it full stack. It's a complete solution that handles every aspect of web application development. Now, the no-code part means that instead of writing programming code to make all of this work, you use visual interfaces, drag-and-drop tools, drop-down menus, and configuration panels. It's like the difference between writing a book by hand with pen and paper versus using a word processor with spell check, formatting tools, templates, and all the modern conveniences that make writing easier and more accessible. Now, let's walk through the process of getting started with Bubble, and I'm going to explain every single step in detail so that you understand well. First, you need to navigate to the official Bubble.io website. You can do this by opening your web browser, whether that's Chrome, Firefox, Safari, Edge, or any other modern browser, and typing bubble.io into the address bar. Make sure you're going to the official website, which should have a clean, professional design and clear information about building applications without code.
Once you're on the Bubble homepage, you'll see a prominent button that says Get Started or Start Building. Click on this button to begin the account creation process. When you click Sign Up with Google, you'll be redirected to Google's authentication system, where you'll log in with your regular Google username and password. After you authenticate with Google, you'll be redirected back to Bubble, and the system will ask you a series of questions to understand what kind of application you're interested in building. These questions help Bubble customize your experience and provide relevant templates and suggestions. During the setup process, Bubble will present you with options for different types of applications you can create. Web applications are the most common and versatile type of these are applications that run in web browsers and can be accessed from any device with an internet connection, computers, tablets, and smartphones. Web applications are platform independent, meaning they work on Windows, Mac, Linux, iOS, Android, or any other operating system that has a web browser. Examples include Gmail, Facebook, Twitter, Netflix, and most of the applications you probably use regularly. The advantage of web applications is that users don't need to download or install anything, and updates are automatic, since the application runs on your servers. Mobile applications refer to native apps that users download from app stores like the Apple App Store or Google Play Store. These apps are installed directly on users' phones or tablets and can take advantage of device-specific features like cameras, GPS, push notifications, and offline functionality. However, creating mobile applications is significantly more complex and typically requires additional tools and processes to publish to app stores. For beginners, I strongly recommend starting with a web application. Bubble also offers an artificial intelligence-powered application generator that can create a basic application structure based on your description. This feature uses advanced AI to interpret your requirements and automatically generate pages, data structures, and basic workflows. While this AI generator can be helpful for getting started quickly, I want to set proper expectations about what it can and cannot do. The AI will create a foundation for your application, but it will not create a complete, fully functional application ready for users. You'll still need to customize the design, refine the workflows, add specific business logic, integrate with external services, and handle countless details that the AI cannot anticipate. More importantly, for learning purposes, if you rely too heavily on the AI generator without understanding the underlying concepts, you'll struggle to modify and improve the generated application. It's like using a calculator without understanding basic math. You can get answers, but you can't solve new problems independently. For this tutorial, we're going to skip the AI generator and build everything manually so that you understand every component and how they work together. This foundation will serve you well whether you use AI assistants in the future or build everything from scratch. Once you've completed the initial setup, you'll be presented with Bubble's main application editor. This is where you'll spend most of your time building your application, so it's essential to understand every part of the interface thoroughly. The Bubble editor might seem overwhelming at first glance because there are many panels, buttons, icons, and options visible. This is completely normal, and I want to assure you that every element has a purpose and you'll become comfortable with the interface very quickly as we work through examples together. Let's start with the most important area, the left sidebar. This sidebar contains the primary navigation for all the major sections of your application development environment. Think of this sidebar as the main control panel for your entire application. Bubble applications are built on 4 fundamental pillars or components, and each of these has its own section in the left sidebar. Understanding these 4 pillars is absolutely critical to mastering Bubble, so let me explain each one in extensive detail. 1. Design the visual foundation. The Design tab is where you create everything that users see and interact with in your application. This includes pages, elements like text and buttons, layout structures, colors, fonts, images, and all the visual components that make up your user interface. Think of the Design tab as your artist's canvas combined with an architect's blueprint. Just as an artist uses different brushes and colors to create a painting, you'll use different elements and styling options to create your application's interface. And just as an architect plans how rooms connect and how people move through a building, you'll plan how different pages connect and how users navigate through your application. Every visual element in your application, every button that users click, every form field they fill out, every image they see, every piece of text they read, all of this is created and configured in the Design tab. The Design tab is also where you make your application responsive, meaning it looks good and functions properly on different screen sizes, from large desktop monitors to small smartphone screens. This involves understanding how elements resize, reposition, and adapt to different viewing environments.
2. The workflow. The workflow tab is where you define what happens when users interact with your application. This is the behavioral logic that makes your application dynamic and interactive, rather than just a static display of information. Every time a user clicks a button, submits a form, logs in, makes a purchase, sends a message, or performs any action in your application, workflows determine what happens next. Workflows are like detailed instruction manuals that tell Bubble exactly what to do in response to specific user actions or system events. For example, when a user clicks a sign up button, a workflow might 1. Validate that the email address is properly formatted. 2. Check that the password meets security requirements. 3. Verify that the email address isn't already in use. 4. Create a new user account in the database. 5. Send a welcome email to the new user. 6. Log the user into the application automatically. 7. Redirect them to their profile page. 8. Display a success message. All of these steps happen in sequence, often within seconds, and workflows allow you to define every detail of this process without writing code. Workflows can also respond to other events like page loading, data changes, scheduled times, external API calls, and many other triggers. They can perform calculations, manipulate data, send emails, charge payment cards, update databases, and integrate with external services. 3. The database. The database tab is where you define and manage all the data structures and information storage for your application. This is like designing the filing system for your application, determining what types of information you need to store, how that information is organized, and how different pieces of data relate to each other. In the database tab, you'll create what are called data types. These are like categories or templates for different kinds of information in your application. For example, in a social media application, you might have data types for users with fields for name, email, profile picture, bio, join date, posts with fields for content, author, creation date, number of likes, comments with field for text, author, which post it belongs to, date, messages with field for sender, receiver, content, timestamp. Each data type can have multiple fields that store specific pieces of information. Fields can store text, numbers, dates, images, files, true-false values, geographic coordinates, and references to other data types. The database tab is also where you can view and manually edit the actual data in your application, set privacy rules that control who can see or modify different pieces of information, and create option sets for standardized choices like countries, categories, or status values. Understanding database design is crucial because the structure of your data affects every other aspect of your application. Poor database design can make your application slow, difficult to maintain, and limited in functionality, while good database design creates a solid foundation for growth and complexity. 4. Styles. The Styles tab is where you create and manage consistent design patterns throughout your application. Instead of styling each individual element separately, you can create reusable style definitions that ensure your application has a cohesive, professional appearance. Think of styles like templates or rules that define how certain types of elements should look. For example, you might create a style called primary button that defines the background color, text color, font size, padding, border, radius, and hover effects for all the main action buttons in your application. The advantage of using styles is consistency and efficiency. If you decide to change your primary color from blue to green, you can update the style definition once, and every element using that style will automatically update throughout your entire application. Without styles, you would need to manually update each individual element, which is time-consuming and prone to errors. Styles can be applied to any visual element and can define properties like colors, background text, borders, typography, font family size, weight, spacing, margins, borders, and shadows, hover and interaction effects, responsive behavior. Professional applications typically use comprehensive style systems to maintain visual consistency and brand identity across all pages and elements. We also have plugins. Plugins in Bubble are like extra building blocks. They let you add features and integrations that don't come out of the box. When you select Add Plugin, you see a variety of plugin options you can install to be used in your application. Now let's dive deep into the building blocks of your application's visual design. Visual elements are the individual components that users see and interact with, and understanding how to use them effectively is fundamental to creating successful applications.
When you're in the Design tab, you'll see a panel on the left side that contains all the available visual elements. These elements are categorized into different groups based on their function and purpose. Text elements. Text elements are used to display any kind of textual information in your application. This might seem simple, but text elements are incredibly versatile and powerful. They can display static text that never changes, like headings and labels, dynamic text that comes from your database, like usernames and post content, formatted text with different fonts, sizes, and colors, links that navigate to other pages, text that changes based on conditions, like showing different messages to different types of users. When you add a text element to your page, you'll see three main tabs in the property: Appearance, Layout, and Conditional. Let me explain each of these in detail because they apply to all elements, not just text. The Appearance tab is where you control how an element looks. By default, this is its normal state, how it appears when the page first loads, and no special conditions are active. The Appearance tab includes options for text content. This is the actual words that will be displayed. You can type static text directly, or you could insert dynamic data that comes from your database or calculations. You can choose from a wide variety of font families, from classic fonts like Arial and Times New Roman to modern web fonts like Open Sans and Roboto. You can also control the font size measured in pixels, the font weight, which determines how bold or light the text appears, and text decoration options like underlining or italics. You can set the text color using a color picker, hex codes, or predefined color variables. You can also set background colors for text elements, which is useful for creating highlighted text or callout boxes. You can control how text is aligned, left, center, right, or justified, and adjust line spacing to make text more condensed vertically. The Layout tab. The Layout tab is where you control where an element sits on the page and how it behaves in relation to other elements and different screen sizes. This is one of the most important aspects of application design because it determines the structure and responsiveness of your user interface. You can control how elements are positioned relative to their parent container and to other elements. This includes horizontal and vertical alignment options that determine where elements appear within their designated space. Size and dimensions. You can set fixed widths and heights for elements, or you can make them flexible so they adapt to different screen sizes and content mounts. Understanding when to use fixed versus flexible sizing is crucial for creating responsive designs. Spacing controls. Padding and margins are two different types of spacing that control how elements relate to each other and to the boundaries of their containers. Padding is the internal space within an element, the distance between the element's content and its borders. For example, if you have a button with text inside it, the padding determines how much empty space surrounds the text within the button. More padding makes elements feel more spacious and easier to interact with, while less padding makes elements more compact. Margins are the external space around an element, the distance between the element's borders and other elements or containers. Margins create separation between different parts of your interface and help establish visual hierarchy and organization. Responsiveness settings. These options control how elements behave on different screen sizes. You can set minimum and maximum widths, make elements stretch to fill available space, or keep them fixed at specific sizes. Understanding responsive design is essential because users will access your application from phones, tablets, laptops, and desktop computers with widely varying screen sizes. The Conditional tab, creating dynamic behavior.
The conditional tab is where you can create rules that change how elements appear or behave under different circumstances. This is one of Bubble's most powerful features because it allows you to create highly dynamic and personalized user experiences without writing code. Conditionals work with if-then logic. You specify a condition, the if part, and then define what should change when that condition is true, the then part. For example, you might create a conditional rule that says if the current user is logged in, then show their profile picture. If the current user is not logged in, then show a sign-up button. If the user is hovering their mouse over a button, then change the background color to a darker shade. If the screen width is less than 768 pixels, mobile size, then reduce the font size and adjust the layout. Conditionals can check many different types of conditions: user authentication status, logged in or not, user properties, account type, subscription status, location, data values, number of items, dates, text content, screen size and device type, mouse interactions, hover, click states, form validation, whether required fields are filled, time-based conditions, business hours, specific dates. When conditions are met, you can modify almost any property of an element, change colors, fonts, and visual styling, show or hide elements, completely modify text content, adjust sizes and positioning, enable or disable interactive functionality. One of the most fundamental concepts in Bubble that beginners often struggle with initially is the element tree and the parent-child relationship system. This concept is absolutely crucial to understand because it affects every aspect of how you build and organize your application's interface. When you add elements to your page, they don't just float independently in space. Instead, they exist within a hierarchical structure where elements can contain other elements, creating relationships that determine how they behave, how they're positioned, and how they respond to different conditions. In Bubble terminology, a parent element is a container that holds other elements inside it. Child elements are the elements contained within a parent. Sibling elements are multiple child elements that share the same parent. This hierarchical relationship is visually represented in the element tree panel that shows you the nested structure of all elements on your current page. The hierarchical relationship between elements affects several important aspects of your application. Positioning and layout. Child elements are positioned relative to their parent element. If you move a parent element, all its children move with it automatically. If you resize a parent element, the children may adjust their positions accordingly. Some styling properties can be inherited from parent to child elements, creating consistency without having to manually style every individual element. How elements adapt to different screen sizes depends partly on their position within the hierarchy. Parent elements can define layout rules that affect how all their children behave. A well-structured element tree makes it much easier to find, select, and modify elements as your application grows in complexity. Bubble also provides several types of container elements that are specifically designed to hold and organize other elements. Groups are the most basic type of container. They're like invisible boxes that you can use to organize related elements together. Groups can contain any number and type of other elements, including other groups, creating nested organizational structures. Repeating groups are special containers that automatically duplicate their contents to display lists of data from your database. For example, if you have a list of products in your database, a repeating group can automatically create a visual representation of each product using the same layout template.
Pop-ups are containers that appear on top of the main page content, typically in response to user actions. Pop-ups are useful for displaying detailed information, confirmation dialogues, functional forms, or any content that should temporarily overlay the main interface. Floating groups are containers that remain in fixed positions on the screen, even when users scroll. They're commonly used for navigation menus, chat widgets, or action buttons that should always be accessible. Now that we have a thorough understanding of Bubble's fundamental concepts, let's apply this knowledge by building a complete note-taking application from start to finish. This project will give you hands-on experience with every major aspect of Bubble development.
A note-taking application is an ideal beginner project because it involves all the essential components of web application development: user interface design, data storage, user interactions, and dynamic content display. It's also practical and useful. You'll be building something that you could actually use in your daily life. Our note-taking application will include a professional header with navigation, a dashboard area with application overview and quick actions, a dynamic grid display of all notes, individual note cards with preview information, action buttons for viewing, editing, and deleting notes, responsive design that works on all device types. Let me demonstrate the parent-child concept. Let's drag a group onto our canvas. Before I continue, there's one important thing you need to understand, and that is the index you see in the element tree. This refers to the main page of our web application. If I zoom out, you can see this represents a web page. By default, Bubble gives you 3 pages when you start a project: the main index page, a reset password page, and an error page. You can add new pages anytime by clicking Add New Page. Now I'll drag this text element and place it inside the group. What this means is that the group is now the parent and the text is the child. If I change the group's appearance, let's give a background color so we can see it clearly. Select background style as flat color, and then under background color, let's select a color from the different options. Now we can see how the text sits inside the group. I can also add a button element inside this same group. Now we have one parent, the group, with 2 children, the text and the button. In Bubble, you can arrange elements in different ways. When the container layout is set to column, i.e. group's direction is column, we see the elements stacked on top of each other vertically. Now, if the container layout is changed to row, then they line up side by side horizontally. You can also see the change in the elements tree section, where we have 2 vertical bars for the row configuration, side by side, and 2 horizontal bars on top of each other for the column. You can also control how elements align within their parent container. This refers to the various ways containers are arranged within the parent container. For space between, items spread apart with space between them. Space around, items have equal space around. For bottom aligned, all elements sit flush against the bottom of the container. You can see how the button and text element are sitting at the bottom. For center aligned, all elements float in the middle of the container. And for top aligned, all elements start at the very top of the container. Alright, now that we understand that, let's start building our application. We start by creating the header section of our application. The header is the top area that typically contains the application name, logo, and primary navigation elements. A well-designed header provides users with immediate context about where they are and how to navigate to different parts of the application. First, I'll add a group element to our page and position it at the very top. I'll adjust the width to fit the size of the page, and I'll adjust the height to my preferred length. I'm going to rename this group Header so that it's clearly identifiable in our element tree. Naming elements descriptively is a best practice that becomes increasingly important as your applications grow in complexity. Now let's configure the layout properties of our header to achieve the professional appearance we want. For the main header group, I'll set the layout direction to row. This means that the child elements will be arranged horizontally, side by side, rather than stacked vertically. I'll set the container alignment to space between. This is a powerful layout option that automatically distributes child elements with equal space between them. We select the option "This element is visible on page load." This means anytime the page is reloaded, we still see the header group. Now, we see the parent container type is fixed. That means our index page, which is the parent container, is not responsive. We select the index under the elements tree and edit its properties. We see that the container layout is fixed. We're going to change that to column. That means every element on this web page is going to be arranged on top of each other in a column. So basically, we have elements stacked over each other, which is in contrast with the header where elements are arranged side by side in a row container layout. So for the index page, we have column container layout, and for the header, we have row container layout. For the horizontal alignment, we leave the option at left aligned. This makes the header align to the left-hand side. Now, I don't want the header to have a fixed width, because that would make it look awkward on different screen sizes. Instead, I'll set the minimum width to 0 pixels and a maximum width to infinity. This allows the header to dynamically adjust its width to match the screen size, whether someone is viewing the application on a phone, tablet, or desktop computer. For the height, I'll set a minimum height to 0 and a maximum height to infinity. This ensures the header has adequate visual presence, but I'll also enable fit height to content, so that the header can grow taller if needed to accommodate its contents. For the container margins and paddings, we leave as it is for now, which is 0 pixels for top, bottom, left, and right. Now, within this group header, I want to create two separate areas, one for the application branding, logo and name, and another for navigation elements. To do this, I'll add two more groups inside the header group. Now, there are different ways to add elements in Bubble. You can either drag to the canvas itself or to the elements tree, where you can position the element exact wherever you want it. So we put the first group under the header element, and then we add another group and place it under the same header element. And we see that the elements are arranged side by side, and they have equal dimensions. For the visual appearance of our header, I want to create a clean, professional look that establishes a strong brand presence for our note-taking application. Now, in Bubble, we have default styles. These include transparent, shadow, outline, and filled. If we navigate to the Style section, we can edit these styles or create a new style. You can understand styles as global variables for the appearance of elements. When we go under the Group section, we see the different styles for this particular type of container. To illustrate this, if I select Transparent, which is the style for our current group, we can edit the border style to Solid, and then choose Red as the border color. Now we see here the option Find Elements in Use, meaning we can know the particular elements from our Design tab using this style. And we can see Remove as default. This means that this is the default style for all group elements.
So if I select Find Elements in Use, you see the various elements in our design. Using this style, we see the header element. Now, let's go back to the Design tab, and we see the changes in the style of the groups. All the groups have a border with color red. So this is how we can use styles in our design. Now, let's go back to the Styles tab and undo the changes we made. In Bubble, you can undo changes by clicking the Undo button. Now we click the Undo button twice to undo the changes for the border and its color. Let's head back to our Design tab and continue editing. This 3-level hierarchy here gives us precise control over the layout and makes it easy to adjust the positioning and styling of different header elements independently. Now I'll rename Group C to Group Header Logo Container. And then I'll rename Group B as Group Header Nav. Now we want to create our logo and then our navigation bar. So inside the logo container, I'll add a text element that will serve as our application name and primary branding element. In the navigation container, I'll add a link element that will serve as our primary navigation. Let's adjust the text element properly. We have to ensure that it is a child to the Group Header Logo Container. So we have the text element under the Group Header Logo Container and the link element under the Group Header Nav. We rename the text element as Text Header Title, meaning this will display our header title. And then we also rename the link as Link Nav Home. This link is basically our homepage navigation. Now we want to edit the appearance and layout of these elements. Now we want to make a quick change to the appearance of the header element. We change the style to Custom. Then we select the background style as Flat Color. We also have options for Image and Gradient. We now select the color using the color picker, and we see that the header element has a background color. Now we move to the Group Header Logo Container. We want to edit the layout. For the container alignment, I'll set the direction to row, even though it currently contains only one element. This gives us flexibility to add a logo image later if we want to. I'll set the container alignment to left aligned,
And then with the vertical alignment, we choose center vertical alignment, which will position our text nicely within the container. After choosing the container layout, we can choose how elements are arranged on the opposite axis as well. So in a row layout, we have vertical alignment. And in a column layout, we have horizontal alignment. Now we want to enable fit width to content for this container, which means it will only take up as much horizontal space as needed for its contents. So we see that the size of the container shrinks to fit the size of the text element, which is the text header title. This is important because it allows the space between alignment of the main header to work properly. We set minimum height to 0 pixels and minimum width also to 0 pixels. Both max width and height are set to infinity. Now for the text element itself, I want to make it look like a professional application logo. First, we change the vertical alignment to center. We make no further changes. Let's move to the appearance. I'll change the text to quick notes. Now we select an appropriate heading style. The built-in heading styles in Bubble are often too large for header logos, so I'll customize the font size to exactly 20 pixels, which provides good visibility without overwhelming the header. And we see that the particular style has been overwritten. Now let's change the font family to Merriweather, which is a professional, readable font that works well for application branding. We leave the font weight at 600 pixels, which is appropriately bold for a logo. We are done with the text header title. Now let's move to the group header navigation. For containers layout, I'll set the direction to row to accommodate multiple navigation elements if we add them later. I'll add gap spacing of 32 pixels between elements, which creates nice visual separation between navigation items. I'll set the vertical alignment to center so that navigation elements are properly aligned. With the logo text, we set the minimum width to 0 pixels and minimum height to 0 pixels as well. For the max height and width, we set to infinity. Like the logo container, I'll enable fit width to content, so it only uses the space it needs. And the container is on the extreme right. And this is due to the fact that for our header container, we chose space between. We can see the changes when we select space around, right aligned, and left aligned. However, we need space between. Now let's edit the navigation link itself. Under the layout options, select centered as the vertical alignment. Then change the minimum width to 0 pixels and the minimum height to 0 pixels as well. Now let's move to appearance. For the appearance, change the text to dashboard. The link destination is set to internal page, and the destination page is the index page. In another context, you can select any of the pages in your application. This element creates a functional navigation link that users can click to return to the main dashboard. Now, to give our header a polished, professional appearance, I need to add appropriate padding. Padding is the internal space within an element. It creates breathing room between the content and the edges of the container. For our header, I'll add 24 pixels of padding on the top and bottom. This creates vertical breathing room that makes the header feel substantial without being too bulky. I'll add 32 pixels on the left and right sides. This ensures that the header content doesn't touch the edges of the screen, even on narrow mobile devices. You can immediately see the visual improvement that proper padding makes. The header now looks professional and well-proportioned instead of cramped or awkward. Below our header, we need to create the main content area where the primary functionality of our application will live. I'll add another group container to the canvas. This main content area needs different layout properties from the header. While the header used row direction to arrange elements horizontally, the main content area will use column direction to stack content sections vertically. We'll leave the container alignment as top aligned. We'll not apply gap spacing. Now for the horizontal spacing, I'll set the horizontal alignment to horizontal stretch so that content sections extend across the full width of the available space. For responsive design, I'll again use minimum width of 0 pixels and maximum width of infinity. For the height, I'll set a substantial minimum height of 640 pixels because this area will contain a lot of content, but I'll also enable fit height to content so it can grow as needed. I'll give the main content area a subtle background color that's the same as the headers. This creates visual coherence between different sections of the application and helps users understand the organizational structure of the interface. Now, we're done with that. We can see the main text area, Now we want to remove the space between the header and the main workspace area. We go to Index and undo the option Apply Gap Spacing Between Elements.
Next, we reduce the min height to 800 pixels. Now we're making some progress. Within the main content area, I'll create T sections, which are Dashboard section and Notes section. I'll add 2 new group elements inside the main content area. Both groups should be children of the main container group. I'll rename the first group as Dashboard section. Then we rename the second group as Group Notes section. The Dashboard section will contain 3 key elements. 1, a main heading that explains what the application does. 2, a subtitle that provides additional context. 3, a prominent call to action button for creating new notes. That is, 2 text elements and a button element. For the dashboard section's layout, I'll use column direction to stack these elements vertically. I'll set the container alignment to center so that all elements are centered horizontally within the section. And for the horizontal alignment, we make it horizontal stretch. We set the minimum width to 0 pixels and minimum height of 0 pixels. Both maximum width and height are set at infinity. I'll add substantial padding of 64 pixels for top and bottom sides, and then left and right padding is set to 32 pixels each. This is to give this section a spacious, uncluttered feeling that focuses users' attention on the key elements. Designing the main heading, the first element in the dashboard section, is the main heading. We'll rename Add as Dashboard Title. For the layout, we select horizontal alignment as centered. We unselect Fit Width to Content. I'll also add a bottom margin of 16 pixels to create appropriate spacing between this heading and a subtitle that will appear below it. This gives a 16 pixels gap from the first text element in the dashboard section to the second text element in the dashboard section. For the appearance, our text element will show Your Notes. Simplified. This heading serves as both a welcome message and a brief explanation of what the application does. I'll set this text element to use heading 2 style initially, but I'll customize it to exactly the size and appearance I want. I'll use the Merriweather font family to maintain consistency with our header logo. And I'll set the font weight to 600, which is semi-bold and provides good visual hierarchy without being too heavy. For the text alignment, I'll center the heading so it creates a focal point for the entire dashboard section. I'll override the font size to 48 pixels, which is large enough to be impactful, but not so large that it overwhelms the interface. Just as we make layouts adapt to different screen sizes, we should also make text sizes adapt appropriately. This is an important concept that many beginners overlooked. Responsive typography. I'll add a conditional formatting rule to our main heading that says when the current page width is less than or equal to mobile landscape size, which is typically 480 pixels, then change the font size to 20 pixels and adjust the line spacing to 1.4. Bubble automatically creates some responsive rules for common screen sizes, but you'll often want to customize these to match your specific design requirements. The other text element serves as a descriptive subtitle. We rename as Dashboard Subtitle. This text will provide users with a clear understanding of what the application offers and why they should use it. For the layout, the horizontal alignment will be centered. For the max width, we change it to 672 pixels. Then we add a bottom margin of 32 pixels. The subtitle text will read, Capture ideas quickly and clearly, a distraction-free design built for focus and productivity. For the styling of this subtitle, I'll use the built-in Body 16 text style, but I'll customize it to fit our design. I'll center align this text to match our heading. I'll set the font size to 14 pixels, which is large enough to be easily readable, but smaller than our main heading to establish proper visual hierarchy. Next, we move on to the Call to Action button, which is one of the most important elements on our dashboard because it enables users to perform primary function of our application, creating new notes. I'll rename as Add Note Button. For the button's layout properties, I'll center it horizontally and then set minimum width to 0 pixels. And set maximum height to 40 pixels. This is important for mobile usability. Buttons that are too small are difficult to tap accurately on touchscreens. Now we set appropriate padding. Padding inside buttons is crucial for usability.
Too little padding makes buttons feel cramped and hard to click, while too much padding makes them feel bloated. I'll use 16 pixels of horizontal padding, that is, top and bottom padding, and 32 pixels of vertical padding, that is, left and right padding. For the appearance, the button label will read Create Note. This is clear, action-oriented text that immediately tells users what will happen when they click. For the button's appearance, I want to make it visually prominent. Since it's the primary action on this page, I'll use Bubble's built-in primary button style as a starting point, but I'll customize it to match our application's design aesthetic. I'll set the font size to 18 pixels to make the text easily readable, and I'll use a medium font weight, that is, font weight 500. In web typography, the font weight affects how thick or thin the letters appear. For the button color, I'll choose a blue that stands out against our page background, while still looking professional. The specific color I'll use is a primary blue shade that provides good contrast and draws user attention. Now we need to create the section where users' notes will be displayed. This is where the dynamic functionality of our application really comes into play, as this section will automatically show different content based on what's stored in our database. This section will be divided into two main parts. One, a header area with the section title and an Add Note button. Two, the actual display area for notes, which we use a repeating group. I'll add another group element to our main content area under the Group Notes section. Then I'll add a repeating group within the Notes section. I'll first rename the group container as Note Header. Then I'll rename the repeating group as Note Grid. The Note Header group will contain a text element, which will contain the note's header, and then a button element, which is another option to add a new note. For the note's header layout, I'll use row direction so that the title and button appear side by side. I'll set the container alignment to space between, which will push the title to the left and the button to the right, similar to how we structured our main application header. I'll set the horizontal alignment to horizontal stretch, so this header extends across the full width of the notes section. We set the minimum height to 0. Now for the text element under the group note header, we'll rename as Text Note Item. And then we'll rename the button element as Add Note Header Button. For the text note title, we'll change the layout properties. I'll set the vertical alignment to centered. For the appearance, the text element will display Your Notes. For the style, I'll use heading 4. I'll set the font weight to 500, that is, medium font weight. I'll customize the font size to 18 pixels. This creates a clear section header that's smaller than our main dashboard heading, but still prominent enough to organize the content visually. For the Add Note Header button, the label is going to be Add Note. This provides users with a second opportunity to create notes. And having multiple entry points for key actions is a good user experience practice. I'll give this button a background color that's less prominent than our primary blue, perhaps a muted version of our primary blue color palette. I'll select the border style as solid with the border roundness at 6 to match our primary button styling language. For the layout properties, the vertical alignment is set to centered. Then we have the minimum height set to 40 pixels.
For the padding, we have top and bottom padding set at 8 pixels, and then 16 pixels for left and right padding. Now for the group notes section, we'll add padding of 32 pixels for right and left padding, and then top and bottom padding set at 64 pixels. Now comes one of the most powerful features in Bubble, the repeating group. This element automatically creates multiple copies of a layout template based on data from your database. It's what allows us to display any number of notes without having to manually create individual display elements for each one. But before we get to that, in the group note header, we'll add a margin of 32 pixels to separate it from the repeating group. In the repeating group, we'll add a group with 3 child elements: the parent group element that will serve as the container for each note card, and the child elements are Note Header, contains the note title and action buttons. 2, Note Preview shows the first few lines of the note content. 3, Note Metadata shows creation date and last edited date. Now the repeating group needs to know how to arrange the items it displays. I'll untick the option Set Fixed Number of Rows, and I'll set the number of columns to 3. This means that notes will be arranged in rows of 3. This makes efficient use of screen space. Now we select Display Item as Masonry Grid. Now we go to Layout. For the horizontal alignment, we set it to Horizontal Stretched. Let's set the minimum width to 0 and minimum height to 0 as well. For responsive design, I'll add a conditional rule when current page width is less than or equal to tablet size 992 pixels. The property we'll change is that we'll set number of columns to 2. This ensures that on smaller screens, we show only 2 columns instead of 3, but preventing the individual note cards from becoming too narrow to be useful. We'll get a type of content very soon. Inside the repeating group, I need to design the template that will be used for each individual note. This template will be repeated automatically for every note in our database. I'll rename this as Note Card. This group will contain all the visual elements that make up a single note's display: the title, a preview of the content, metadata like creation date, and action buttons. I'll rename the first child group as Group Note Header, then the next child element as Note Preview, and the last child element as Group Meta. For the note card appearance, I want to create a clean, card-like design that clearly separates each note from the others. I'll create a custom style called Card that I can reuse throughout the application. The card style will include a background style of flat color with white background color to make each card stand out, border style, solid 1 pixel wide to define the card edges, a border roundness of 8 pixels for modern rounded corners, border color, subtle gray, a shadow style set to outlet to give the cards depth and make them feel elevated from the background, horizontal offset 0, vertical offset 1, blur radius 2, spread radius 0. Then we select box shadow color, padding of 16 pixels on all sides to create breathing room inside each card. Now let's head back to the Design tab. Under the appearance for the note card, select Style as Card. For the layout, remove gap spacing between elements, set minimum width to 0 and minimum height to 0 as well. Now, under the repeating note grid, we change the row gap to 24 pixels and the column gap to 24 pixels as well. We can now see the gap between the note cards. Inside the note header, I'll add a text element which will hold the note title. The note title text element will display dynamic data. This means it will show different text for each note based on what's stored in our database. For the note header, this group will use row layout direction with space between, container alignment. This will push the note title to the left and the action buttons, which we are yet to add, to the right. For the horizontal alignment, we select Stretched Out and change the minimum width to 0 pixels and minimum height to 0 pixels as well. For the text note title, under the text display section, under the appearance, we'll select Insert Dynamic Data. We'll select any option for now, as we'll get into that later. Once that is done, we see an option for Canvas Placeholder. Now I'll set a placeholder text like Meeting Notes so we can see how it looks during design. I'll style this title text with 18 pixels font size and medium font weight 500 to make it prominent but not overwhelming. For the action buttons, I'll add a group to contain action buttons. I'll rename as Note Actions. I'll add 3 buttons to the note header for the different actions, which include View, Delete, and Edit. Let's configure the Note Actions container under Layout. Change the layout direction to row, then we apply space between elements. We'll set column gap to 8 pixels. I'll select Fit Width to Content. Then I'll set minimum width to 0 pixels and minimum height to 0 as well. Now we want to edit the buttons individually. We rename the buttons. The first is View Note, the second is Edit Note, and the third is Delete Note. I want to use icon buttons rather than text buttons because they take up less space and create a cleaner visual design. Bubble includes integrations, which provides thousands of professional icons. For the View Note button, we select button type as icon, then under Phosphor, search for eye and select it. For these buttons, I'll create another custom style called Ghost that I can reuse. This style will have font weight of 500, change the font color to black. For the background style, we set to None, roundness 6, and border style solid. Then the border color, we select cream color. Then for the layout, 8 pixels for top and bottom padding, 16 pixels for left and right padding. The hover effect is created using conditional formatting. I'll add a condition that says when this element is hovered, select a property to change that is the background style to flat color and set the background color to a very light gray. This provides visual feedback to users that the buttons are interactive, which is important for usability. The icon color should be set to black. We reduce the icon size to 16 pixels. I'm going to change the color again to something gray. For the layout, we'll make this fixed height and fixed width. The width is set to 16 pixels and the height is set to 16 pixels as well. For the Edit Note button, we select button type as icon, under Phosphor, search for pencil, then select it. Select the style as Ghost for consistency, then change the icon color to gray, reduce the icon size to 16 pixels. Under Layout, make this element fixed width and fixed height, then set the width to 16 pixels and set the height to 16 pixels as well. For the Delete Note button, we select button type as icon, under Phosphor, search for trash, then select it. Select the style for consistency, reduce the icon size to 16 pixels. Change the icon color to gray. Under Layout, make this element fixed width and fixed height, then set the width to 16 pixels and set the height to 16 pixels as well. Below the note header, we have another text element. This element displays a preview of the note's content. This gives users a quick glimpse of what each note contains without having to open it. It shows the first few lines to help users identify their notes quickly. For the layout, select Horizontal Alignment to Horizontal Stretched. Then, we add a bottom margin of 16 pixels to create space between the preview and the metadata section. Also, for the note card header, we add a bottom padding of 16 pixels back. To the note preview, under Appearance, select Dynamic Data to get the Canvas placeholder option, and we will fill that with some text to preview how it looks, so this text will be replaced by actual data from your database.
I'll reduce the font size to 14 pixels, which is smaller than the title. To create hierarchy, I'll change the font weight to 400. For the font color, I'll use the same dark gray color. Now we move to the Note Metadata Container, which is at the bottom of each note card. I'll add metadata that shows when the note was created and when it was last modified. This information helps users understand the freshness and history of their notes. We'll add two text elements under the Note Metadata. Now let's edit the Note Metadata's properties. First, we change the layout direction to row, and for the container alignment, we choose space between. This will place the creation date on the left and the last modified date on the right. For horizontal alignment, we select Stretched. Then I'll set minimum width to 0 pixels and minimum height to 0 as well. We'll rename the text element as Created Date and the second text element as Updated Date. For the created date, we select Insert Dynamic Data. For the placeholder text, I'll use Created January 15th, 2024. Then we reduce the font size to 12 pixels, which is smaller than other text, to indicate secondary importance. Then we change the font color. Then under the layout, select Center under Vertical Alignment. For the updated date, we also select Insert Dynamic Data. For the placeholder text, we input Updated 1-15-2025. We reduce the font size to 12 as well. Then we change the font color to gray. Then under the layout, select Center under Vertical Alignment. Now we want to look at how to create our data types that we'll be using in the application. Remember that this is a note-taking application which takes notes from users and displays them with a repeating group. Let's go to our data section. When you create an application from scratch, Bubble automatically creates a data type user, which contains the email as text. This is a built-in field here. It also includes modify date as date, created date as date, and then slug as text. In Bubble.io, a slug is a URL-friendly text identifier that's automatically generated for database entries. Now we're going to create a new data type. We create a new data type here, and we want to name the data type. I'm going to create it as note. Now, what is this data type going to contain? It's going to contain a list of different things. Select Create New Field, and first field we will be adding is Content, and the field type is going to be text. This is going to be the content of the note input by the user. I'm going to create another field. I'm going to name this Title. This is also going to be a text field type. Then click Create. Now we have content and title. If we go to our app data, we see all notes and all users. The notes have fields Content, Title, Created Date, Modified Date, and your slug. You have options here also to copy and restore database, and then you can also switch to live database. You can upload data files with the Upload button. You can add new entries here. You can also modify entries, and you can add a new entry here yourself. And you can delete any entry. Because of the data types, Bubble automatically creates these fields: Creator, Modified Date, and Created Date, and Slug. We don't have to create Modified Date and Created Date again for our application.
Having laid this introduction, let's head back to our Design tab. Now we want to create what we call overlays. These are things that pop up, for example, when you click Create a Note, what is supposed to pop up? When you click Add Note, when you click Delete Notes, when you click Edit, Note, View, and Edit Note, what is supposed to pop up? That's what we want to look at right now. So under the Containers section, select Pop-up and drag onto the canvas. Now we're going to adjust the appearance and the layout. So the type of content is Node. Now I want to change some properties. We set the border style to solid and the roundness wheel to adjust to 12, and the width we leave it as 1. For the shadow style, we select Outset. Horizontal offset we set to 0. The vertical offset we set to 20. Blur radius we set to 25. And then for spread radius we set to -5. Now we head to the layout. We change the minimum width to 0 pixels, maximum width we set at 400 pixels, we set the minimum height to 0 and the maximum height to infinity. For the padding style, we set top and bottom padding to 24 and left and right padding to 24 as well. We're going to rename this as Delete Confirmation Pop-up. For this Delete Confirmation Pop-up, we'll add 2 groups here. We rename this as Delete Pop-up Header. We rename this as Delete Confirmation Content. Now let's configure the Delete Pop-up Header. Under Appearance, we set the type of content for the data source. We're going to use Parent Groups Node. For the layout, we need the container layout as row, and then the container alignment as space between, and then the horizontal alignment as horizontal stretch. Then a minimum width of 0 pixels, and the maximum width of 0 pixels as well. I'm going to add a bottom padding of 24 pixels. The next thing I'm going to edit is the group Delete Confirmation Content. Under Layout, the container layout is column, then container alignment is top aligned. I want to apply gap spacing where my row gap is set to 16 pixels. Horizontal alignment is horizontal stretched, minimum width is 0 pixels, and minimum height 0 pixels as well, no padding. Under Appearance, select the type of content as Note and the data source as Parent Groups Node. Next, I'll add 2 groups to the group Delete Confirmation Content. Then we add the text element to the same group. The text element is going to contain the delete warning text. The second one is going to contain the Delete Notes Preview, which is a preview of the about to be deleted note. We'll also rename this as Delete Form Actions. This presents the user with the option to delete or cancel. We select Delete Warning Text and input the text. If you're going to delete this note, this action cannot be undone. We set the pixel size to 14 pixels. For the layout, we set the horizontal alignment to horizontal stretched with minimum width 0 and maximum 0 as well. The next thing is the Group Delete Notes Preview. Now for the layout, we set the horizontal alignment to horizontal stretched. We set the minimum width to 0 pixels and the minimum height to 0 pixels. Then we add a padding of 12 pixels each for top, bottom, left, and right padding. Now for the appearance, we set the type of content. We have notes. For data source, we set to Parent Groups Node. We set the background style as flat color. We'll choose a background color, and then we select our border style as solid roundness. We set it to 6. Border width is 1, and the color we set to a gray color. For the Delete Note Preview, we'll add 2 text elements. This first text element will contain the title of the note you're going to be deleted. We're going to be Deleted Note Title. For the second, we rename as Delete Note Content, and this is going to contain the content of the note to be deleted.
For the Delete Note title, for the appearance, we select Dynamic Data as Parent Groups Notes Title. In the Canvas placeholder, we input Meeting Notes, Project Alpha. Then we change the font size to 14 pixels. Then we adjust the font weight, 500 for medium. For the layout, we select Horizontal Stretch for horizontal alignment, and then we add a bottom margin of 8 pixels.
Next, we edit for the Delete Note Content. For the appearance, we select Dynamic Data and set it to Parent Groups Note Content. We can select Truncated to maybe the first 200 characters. For the Canvas placeholder, we input some text there to have a visual idea. We adjust the font size to 12 pixels, and we leave the font weight at 400. And then for our layout, we set the horizontal alignment to horizontal stretch. Now we set the minimum width to 0 pixels and the maximum width to infinity.
Next, we edit the Delete Form Actions, where the actions will use 2 buttons, one for cancel, the other for delete. For the group Delete Form Actions, we set the container layout to row, and then we make it right aligned. We apply gap spacing with a column gap of 12 pixels. And we set the horizontal alignment to horizontal stretch. We set minimum width to 0, minimum height to 0. Then we add a bottom padding of 16 pixels, a top padding of 16 pixels. Now for the appearance, we just select the type of content as note, then data source parent groups note. Next, we'll configure our buttons. We rename the first as cancel delete button, and then the second as confirm delete button. For the first button, we set the label to cancel. We change the background color to white or gray color. And then under layout, we set the vertical alignment to vertical stretch. Then we set minimum width to 0 pixels and minimum height to 40 pixels. For the padding, we set to 8 pixels for top and bottom padding and 16 pixels for left and right. Lastly, we change font color to black. Next, we have confirm delete button. We set the label to delete. Note, we leave the font color as white, but this time set the background color to red. We adjust the border roundness to 6. For our layout, we set vertical alignment to vertical stretch. We set minimum width to 0, minimum height to 40. For the padding, we set to 8 pixels for top and bottom padding and 16 pixels for left and right. For the delete confirmation pop-up, we want to add some padding. Here we set left padding to 16. The last thing for this pop-up is the delete pop-up header. We'll add a text element and a button element. Let's edit the text element. Under Appearance, we input delete note. Then we change the font size to 20 pixels. The font weight we change from 400 to 500. For our layout, vertical alignment is center. Now we move to the button. For the appearance, under the button type, we select icon for label. Under phosphor, we search for X and we select the icon. For the style, we select ghost. We reduce the icon size to 16 pixels. Under layout, we select make element fixed width and then make element fixed height. We set the width to 16 pixels and the height to 16 pixels as well.
For delete warning text, let's remove the left padding for the group delete form actions. We'll remove the bottom padding and leave just the top padding for better design. Now we want to duplicate this pop-up. I'll copy this pop-up and then paste it into the index page. Next, we rename this as View Notes Pop-up. We rename the child elements as well, rename this as View Pop-up Header, and the next one as View Note Content. Under the pop-up, we navigate to the text Delete Note. Instead of Delete Note, we rename it as View Pop-up Title. We change the text here to Dynamic Data, which is our parent group's note title. For the placeholder, I'll input Meeting Notes Project Alpha. For the button, we rename it as Close View Pop-up Button. We don't need to edit the appearance and layout for this. The next thing we're going to do is delete this text element. Then we rename this group as View Note Text. We're going to delete this text element as well, because we don't need it. Then rename this text element as View Note Content Text. Now we'll change the appearance of the View Note Content Text. We change the display text to Parents Group Notes Content and change the placeholder as well. This text element will display the content of our notes. We remove the bottom margin for this element. For the form actions, I'll rename it as View Note Meta. Then I'll delete the buttons. Then I'll add text elements for the created date and the modified date. Under the Layout section of View Note Meta, we set the container alignment to space between. We rename the first text element as View Created Date and the second as View Updated Date. For the created date, under Appearance, I'll set the dynamic data to Parents Group Notes Creation Date. I'll set the placeholder as January 15th, 2025, and then reduce the font size to 12 pixels. For the layout, we set the vertical alignment to vertically stretched. Then for the updated date, we'll set the dynamic data to Parents Group Notes Modified Date. In the Canvas placeholder, we input updated January 20th, 2025. We reduce the font size to 12 pixels. Under the layout, we set the vertical alignment to vertically stretched. Now we have our View Notes pop-up, which will display the note content. We copy the delete confirmation pop-up again and paste it into the index page. Then we rename it to Edit Note Pop-up. We rename the first child group element to Edit Pop-up Header. For the second group, we rename it to Edit Pop-up Form. Under the header group, we change the title text to Edit Note. We rename the button element in the header group to Close Edit Pop-up Button and rename the text element as Edit Pop-up Title.
For the edit pop-up form, we need 3 groups, so we have to add another group to make it 3 child group elements because we need another group. Now we drag this text element into the group we just added. Now we rename the group as Edit Title Field and then rename the text element as Edit Title Label. Next, we add an input form. This input form will hold the note title from the database. We'll rename the input form to Note Title Input. Now I'm going to configure the title label for appearance. We change the display text to title. For the layout, let's give this a bottom margin of 8 pixels. Then for the title input, we unselect Make this element fixed width. Then choose horizontal alignment as horizontal stretch. We set the minimum width as 170 pixels and minimum height as 40 pixels. We'll untick Make this element fixed height as well. We set the bottom padding to 8 and the top padding to 8 as well. Now for the appearance of the title input, I'm going to type a placeholder here. Please insert title.
The initial content is Insert Dynamic Data. We see the option Parents Groupthing because the parent container has no type of content. So we set the type content of the parent container to Note, and then the data source is Parent Group's Note. Now, for the layout of the title field, we set horizontal alignment to horizontal stretch, set the minimum width to 0, and the minimum height to 0. Now for the note title input under Appearance, we set the initial content to Parent Group's Note Title and the placeholder to Please Insert Title. For the note title input, I'll change the placeholder color to gray. Then I change the background style to flat color, and for the background color, I'll select gray. Next, we rename this group as Edit Content Field. We rename the first text element to Edit Content Label. We delete this text element because we need an input, not a text element. So for this, we'll add a multi-line input, because this will contain content with several lines. We rename the input as Note Content Input. For the Edit Content Label, we clear the displayed text and input the text content. Then we move to the multi-line input. For the placeholder, we input, Write your note here. For the initial content, we'll insert dynamic data, and the value is Parent Group's Notes content. Under Layout, we'll select Make this element fixed width and set the horizontal alignment to horizontal stretch. We set the minimum width to 176 and maximum height to 192 pixels. For the Edit Content field, under Layout, we adjust the padding to 0 for top, bottom, left, and right. For our Edit Content label, I'll change the background style to flat color and maintain the color as white. Now we move to the Form Actions group and rename it as Edit Form Actions. We'll maintain the 2 buttons, but rename the first as Cancel Edit button. We're doing this naming so that when we're creating our workflow, we're able to identify which button is which. It helps in creating your workflow. We rename the second button as Save Changes button. For the Cancel button, I'm going to maintain the properties. But for this Save Changes button, I'm going to change the color to blue. We're looking for a particular kind of blue. You can choose any variation of blue. Under Appearance, we change the label to Save Changes. Now we have our Edit Notes pop-up configured. It shows the note header, then the text title, then the note title from the database, then the text content, then the note content also from the database, and finally the 2 buttons, Cancel and Save Changes. I'll copy this pop-up and use it to create our last pop-up, which is for adding notes. We'll rename it as Add Note Pop-up. Then we also rename this group as Add Pop-up Header. For the appearance, we change the display text to Add Note. We then rename the text element as Add Pop-up Title and rename the button as Close Add Pop-up Button.
We then renamed this group as Add Pop-up Form Field, and this group as Add Content Field, and then this group as Add Title Field. Under the Add Title group, we rename the text element as Add Title Label and rename
Now
the
the
input
changes have been
as Add
applied,
Note
and
Title
I can
Input.
delete the notes
Under
here.
Appearance, we
I'll
clear
go
the
ahead
initial
to delete.
content, so we'll have
I can
just
go
the
to my data
placeholder
set to
showing.
input the note
Under the
directly
Add
here.
Content field, rename
To
the
upload
first
a new
element
entry
as
here,
Add
just
Content
type in the
Label.
title.
Then we rename
I'll
the
also
multi-line
paste my
input
content
as Add
here,
Note Content
and it will be
Input.
created.
For the multi-line
Now
input,
we see I have
don't
an
have
entry.
initial content.
So if I go
we just
back to
have
the
a placeholder.
app, now I have a note
The next thing
displayed
is
here.
the Form Actions.
I can
We'll
view it
rename
here
this group as
and
Add
close the
Form
pop-up.
Actions.
Using
the
the
first
close
button
button,
to
we
cancel
can test
add
each
button,
and every button.
then rename the second
So we
button
see here
as
that when we
Save
click
Note
on
button.
Add Note,
Under
we still have
Appearance,
text
we change
from
the
the
label
previous
to
entry.
Save Note.
So what
Now
we're
we
going
want
to
to
do is
connect
go
our
to our
elements
design,
to the database
to our
where
Add
needed.
Note button.
In the header
I'm going to
section,
edit
we don't
the
need
workflow.
data there, but in our
you go
main
to the
section,
design
there's a
and
button
go to
element.
Add Note pop-up.
So first, make sure
So
our
for the
main
Save
has
Note
a type
button,
of
I'll edit
content
the
as
workflow.
Note.
So
Now
after
under the
hiding
group
the
dashboard
pop-up, I want
section,
to
we
add
set the
another
type
action,
content as
which is
notes
reset
and the data
relevant
source
inputs.
as parents group
Now
note.
we reload our
The next
application.
thing we need is a group note
After
section.
I go to
We
Add
select
Notes,
the type of
we
content
see that the
as
previous
note.
entry has
Now
been
under the
erased.
group note
So
section,
we don't have
we
the
have
previous
group note
text
header.
appearing here
So
all the
for our
time.
group note header,
I'll
we
create
set the
another
type
note,
of content
travel
as
plan.
note, and
Then
the
we
data
input some
source as
text
parent
into the
groups
content
note.
field and
Now we come
save
to the
note.
repeating group. For
And
our
I want to
repeating
edit
group, we
the
change
appearance
the
of the
type of
text
content
preview
to
a bit.
note. And for
Now
the
we go
repeating
to our
group, we
editor.
select the data
I'll
source
set the
as
note
do a
text
search
preview
for.
to have a fixed
Then we
height
set the type
so that
to
we
note.
have consistent cell
This means that
sizes
the
for the
application
notes,
has to
because some
search
notes
for
will
the notes
contain
to be
more
displayed
words.
from the
So if we fit
database.
to content,
Now
we'll
we
have
sort
notes
by
of different
modified
sizes.
date, and for
We set the
descending, we
height
set
to
to
70
yes.
px.
This means that the
To
application
visualize
will
the
search for
responsive
the
design,
notes
if I
from the
reduce the
database
size of the
according to the
window, you
modified
can see
date,
the
and
adjustment.
will display them in descending order, so the newest modified notes appear first. So now for the group note card, under the repeating group, it needs a type content of note. For the group note card header, we select the type of content as note and the data source as parent group's note. Also under the group note card header, for the text note title, we'll leave it as parent group notes title. And then for the group note action, we'll set the type of content as notes and the data source as parent's group note. Now for the text notes preview, we select parent's group notes content, and for the group note meta, we set the type of content to note, and we set the data source to parent group's note. And for the text created date, we set it to parents group's creation date, and for the modified date, we set it to parents group's modified date. So you see, now we have 0 errors in our workflow. You can always search for the errors here and correct them. Now we have no errors, so that means that all our elements are connected to the right data sources.
Now we move on to the workflow. We move to the section for the workflow. So you can add workflows here by clicking Add New Workflow, and you can choose from General Elements or Custom. To illustrate, an example could be when an element is clicked, or you can create your own custom element. So I'll select when an element is clicked, and we can select any element here. These options are from the elements we created in the editor. This can be quite challenging and confusing, so I'll show you another way. I'll delete this workflow and show you the second way. We add workflows, which is in the Design tab, so you don't miss anything. Let's look at the Delete confirmation pop-up. So we have 3 buttons here, and we're going to add workflows for every button. So for the first button, we select Add Workflow. Let's rename this button. So I'll rename it Close Delete Pop-up Button. Now we go back to edit the workflow. This is to avoid confusion. Now let's add action to this. So when you click the Close Delete button, you want to add an element action. That action is going to hide an element, and you're going to hide the Delete confirmation pop-up. We go back to our Design tab. The second button is Cancel. We select and click Add Workflow. This is similar to the other workflow. So we just add an element action, hide an element, and then select the Delete confirmation pop-up. Next, we select the Delete Note. We select Add a Workflow. So for the Delete Note workflow, I'm going to add data action, which is delete a thing. So we're going to delete the parents group's note. This means we are deleting the entire entry. And then after we delete this, you want to add an element action, which is hide an element, which is this confirmation pop-up. So what this means, when you click on the Confirm Delete button, it deletes the notes and hides the delete confirmation pop-up. Let's head back to the editor. Now we move to the View Notes pop-up. I'll add workflows to the buttons here as well. So we have just this Cancel button. We select Add a Workflow. Then we select Add an Element action, which is hide an element. The element is Close View Note pop-up. Go back to your design. So that's basically all the buttons for this pop-up, just this one button. So let's go to Edit Notes pop-up and select this Close button and add a workflow. Now we select the action Hide an Element. The element to hide is the Edit Note pop-up. I go back to my Design tab, and now we select the Cancel button. Then we add a workflow, and we add an element action, which is hide an element, and that element is the Edit Note pop-up. So we go back to our design once again. For the Save Changes button, I add workflow and then add an element action. So we add a data action, which is make changes to a thing, and we're going to make changes to the parents group's note. Then we select the fields. We start with the title.
We search for the keyword input and we select the edit note title input. So this is where the naming becomes important. We want the value of the edit note title input. The input element takes data from a user and we want to store that value in the title field in our database. I'll add another field, the content field, and for the value we use the keyword input to search again. This time we select multi-line edit note content input value. So we are storing the content the user provides in the multi-line input element in the content field. Next, we add an action, which is to hide an element. We're going to hide the element pop-up. We head back to the design, and next we move to the Add Note pop-up. We select the Close button, and then we select Add Workflow. We choose Add Element Action, then we select Hide an Element, and we select Add Note pop-up. We go back to the editor and repeat the same process. For this Cancel button, we add Workflow, select Hide an Element, and select Add Note pop-up. I'll go to the design once again to select the Save Note button, and we'll add a workflow here as well. When the Save Note button is clicked, what should happen? We select Data under the Action options and choose Create New Thing. The content type is Note. Select the field Title equals Note Title Input Value, and then Content equals Multi-line Add Note Content Input Value. Once the note is created, you want to hide the element, which is the Add Note pop-up. So we're done with the buttons in the various overlays or pop-ups. Now we want to configure buttons in the index page. We select the Create Note button and Add Workflow. So whenever I click Add Note, what action should occur? First, you show an element. The element you want to show is your Add Note pop-up. So when you click on the Add Note pop-up button, the Add Note pop-up shows up on your screen. Now let's go to the action items in the note card. We start with the View button and add a workflow. We select the action Display Data in a group. The element we'll select is the View Note pop-up. We also need to show an element, and the element to display is Parents Groups Note. So when the View Note button is clicked, it retrieves data from the database and then shows it in the Edit Note pop-up. So we select another action, which is Show an Element, and we select the View Note pop-up as the element. Next, we select the Edit button and add the workflow. We define the workflow, select Action, Display Data in a Group pop-up. We select the element as Edit Note pop-up, and the data to display is Parent Groups Note. So we select another action, which is Show an Element, and we select the Edit Note pop-up as the element. Okay, let's head back to the design. The last button here is the Delete button. We select Add a Workflow, then select Action as Display Data in a Group pop-up. Element is the Delete Confirmation pop-up. The data to display is Parent Groups Note. We add an element action, which is Show an Element. The element we'll show is the Delete Confirmation pop-up. Go back to the Design tab and select the second Add Note button.
We add a workflow and we add an element action, which is Show an Element, and we select the element Add Note pop-up. We want to make a change to the note card. I'm going to select the type of content as the current cells note because this is a direct child element of the repeating group. So the repeating group searches for the notes and displays them in descending order with regards to the updated date. The notes card then displays the current cell's note depending on a number of notes. Now we're good to go. So we click this button here to preview and see we have our application in real time here. We want to test this out. So I'll create a note with the Create Note button. I'll title it Business Meeting. Then I'll put some text here in the content area. And we need to disable the debugger mode. So I'll disable the debugger mode. Let's try to create the note again. And I'll input the note title and paste some text under the content as well. I'll save the note, and you see our note is being displayed. If you want to view the notes, we have all the full details here. If you want to edit it, you select the Edit button, and you can edit it. So I can edit this and save changes. Now the changes have been applied, and I can delete the notes here. I can go to my data set to input the note directly here. To upload a new entry here, just type in the title. I'll also paste my content here, and it will be created.
Now we see I have an entry. So if I go back to the app, now I have a note displayed here. I can view it here and close the pop-up. So we see here that when we click on Add Note, we still have text from the previous entry. So what we're going to do is go to our design, to our Add Note button. I'm going to edit the workflow. Sorry, you go to the design and go to Add Note pop-up. So for the Save Note button, I'll edit the workflow. So after hiding the pop-up, I want to add another action, which is Reset Relevant Inputs. Now we reload our application. After I go to Add Notes, we see that the previous entry has been erased, so we don't have the previous text appearing here all the time. I'll create another note, Travel Plan. Then we input some text into the Content field and save the note. And I want to edit the appearance of the text preview a bit. Now we go to our editor. I'll set the note text preview to have a fixed height so that we have consistent cell sizes for the notes, because some notes will contain more words. So if we fit to content, we'll have notes of different sizes. We set the height to 70px. To visualize the responsive design, if I reduce the size of the window, you can see the adjustment.
If I had another note titled Daily Plan and input some content and save, we would have 3 notes. Now we can see the responsive design in action. So when I go to the editor, you can see the builder here, and you see we also have the responsive tab, so you can see how your application performs at the various sizes. First 1200 pixels, second 992 pixels, then 768 pixels, and then 320. This is how it's going to display on your mobile phone. So you can design a web application and test how it looks on mobile devices. So we go to our data, and you can see all our entries are displayed here. So click on Refresh Data to see 3 entries. So this brings us to the end of this tutorial. This is the point where I can scale it up to be ready for deployment. So when you're ready for deployment, you have to upgrade from the free tier and move up to the paid plan. Thank you.